Okay, let's just dive right in. For this explainer in our Perennial Truth Library, we're jumping into what is basically a historical detective story. We're going to deconstruct one of the absolute most famous, most repeated phrases in American Christianity. It's a phrase you've almost certainly heard, right? You might have even used it yourself. But as we'll see, its origins hide this massive, massive shift in meaning.
I'm talking about this phrase right here. God will never give you more than you can handle. Just think about how ubiquitous this sentence actually is. I mean, it's literally stitched onto decorative pillows. People read it at funerals. It gets texted to friends who are just completely drowning in the middle of a major crisis. It's culturally foundational, you know? And it's usually offered with nothing but love by someone who honestly just doesn't quite know what else to say.
But I want to challenge you right now with a super simple question. Where exactly is this sentence in the Bible? If you opened up a copy right now, literally any translation, where would you turn? Try to find it in Genesis. Maybe flip through the Psalms. Look for it in the Gospels among the actual words of Jesus. Or, I don't know, try the book of Revelation. Where does it live? Well, nowhere. It's just not there. And honestly, this is the bombshell of our whole investigation today. This specific sentence was never actually written by any biblical author. You literally will not find it in any translation anywhere. And I know, that creates some immediate cognitive dissonance. Like, how on earth can a phrase that everyone just treats as absolute gospel not actually be in any gospel? Section 1. The missing verse. Tracing the origin. So to figure out what actually happened here, we can't just look at modern greeting cards, right? We have to travel all the way back to roughly 53 CE. And doing this brilliantly illustrates the divide. Because on one side, we've got the bumper sticker version, which frames this whole thing as this universal limit on all suffering. But on the other side, we have the actual verse it was pulled from. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. Paul of Tarsus is writing to the church at Corinth. But here's the kicker. He isn't offering some grand general theory of suffering. He is making a highly, highly specific argument. See, the Corinthians were kind of flirting with idol worship. Specifically, eating meat sacrificed to pagan gods. So Paul writes to warn them, and he tells them that God won't let them be tempted beyond what they can bear, and will provide a way of escape. And that's it. It is a promise of escape from a specific temptation. It's not some magical ceiling on human grief or catastrophe.
Section 2. Paul, not Jesus. Clarifying authorship.
And that brings us to the first major suspect in our investigation. Because if you ask most people who originally said God won't give you more than you can handle, they'll usually tell you Jesus said it. But if you go search Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there are absolutely zero gospel parallels. There is zero record of Jesus ever saying this. Now, 1 Corinthians is widely accepted by scholars as a genuinely authenticated letter written by Paul, but just look at what popular memory has done here. We have taken a situational, highly specific piece of pastoral advice from Paul's letter, and we've incorrectly upgraded it to a universal mandate from Jesus himself. And that upgrade makes the claim sound way, way more absolute than what was actually written down.
Section 3. The quiet word swap. Pinpointing the drift.
Okay, so this is our crime scene. This is the exact moment where the true meaning was fundamentally altered. We actually need to pinpoint the moment of linguistic drift here. Let's look at the original Greek word used in Paul's letter, Peirasmos. Now, this word can mean either temptation, like a pull towards sin, or it can mean a trial or testing, depending entirely on the context. And in 1 Corinthians, the context is unambiguously about the temptation to worship idols. But over the centuries, this quiet little word swap happened. We traded a bounded category, resisting a specific sin, for an unbounded category of general universal suffering. And that one little swap, it does all the heavy theological lifting for the bumper sticker version we know today.
So the really crucial point here is this absolutely fantastic gotcha moment from the historical record. Because if Paul really believed God puts a strict cap on our suffering, why on earth did he write this in his very next letter to the exact same church? 2 Corinthians 1:8 says, "We were pressed out of measure, above strength, insomuch that we despaired even of life." Guys, Paul is flat out contradicting the modern bumper sticker here. He is directly describing his own lived experience of being crushed completely past his capacity. He literally was given more than he could handle. Section 4. The damage of misquoting. Real-world harm. Now, I want to be incredibly clear about something here. Examining this, it isn't an attack on well-meaning people. People share this phrase out of deep, deep love and empathy, for sure. But we really do need to look at the real-world harm that this misquote actually produces.
Pastoral counselors and grief therapists warn about this stuff constantly, because when you say this to someone who is actively drowning in a crisis, it completely fails to comfort them. Why? Well, because it quietly implies spiritual failure. Think about it. If the universe supposedly never gives you more than you can handle, but you currently cannot handle your grief or your illness, the direct implication is that you must be doing your faith wrong. It unintentionally weaponizes a message of reassurance into a verdict of judgment against the person who is suffering.
Section 5. The final verdict. Testing the claims. All right, it is time to systematically test the claims of the phrase against the historical text we just uncovered. Let's walk through this breakdown. Is the underlying text a later fabrication? No. 1 Corinthians is highly authenticated. Did Jesus say it? No. Absolutely no gospel parallel. Does the actual verse promise life will never exceed your capacity? No. Again, it only promises an escape from a very specific temptation. So, is the phrase, God will never give you more than you can handle, in the Bible? Not verbatim, not in any translation. It's a mix of real scripture, sure, but with the wrong speaker and a completely wrong scope.
Section 6. The perennial truth. What is worth keeping?
So let's strip away the centuries of greeting card misattributions and that bloated universal scope we talked about. Is there a grounded, perennial takeaway here that is actually worth keeping? Actually, there absolutely is. When you pull back all the fluff, you find this beautiful, cross-traditional parallel. The real comfort isn't that your ego won't be overwhelmed. I mean, let's be real. Life absolutely will give you more than you can handle. You will be crushed sometimes. But the perennial wisdom, which, by the way, rhymes powerfully with Stoic philosophy, Buddhist observation, and Gnostic claims, is that the ground beneath the struggling self doesn't break. The spark of awareness witnessing the pain is not destroyed by the crushing weight. When people reach for that misquote in a crisis, this is what they actually need. Not some false guarantee that the trial will stay small, but the deep, deep reassurance that something within them is greater than the thing being crushed.
So I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer. What happens when we finally let go of comforting inherited slogans and we actually embrace the text for what it is? When we stop relying on folk paraphrases, sure, we might lose a neat and tidy bumper sticker. But what we gain is an honest framework for survival, one that doesn't judge us when we break, and one that connects us to a much deeper, much more resilient truth. Always read the sources yourself, because that is exactly where the real clarity begins.